everybody, Ben Woodruff here with another Falconry video. Today's video, finally going to be doing an introduction to red-tailed hawks. It's been a long time coming, it's about time. It's a very fundamental and important species to be talking about when it comes to falconry. Before I get into this topic though, if you haven't already, if you could please hit subscribe and help me keep this channel up and going, it is very much appreciated. And red-tailed hawks, I want to talk to them a little bit about them as a species and then talk about them in falconry. And because this is a worldwide audience, I have to start off saying, I understand, I know I say this in all the videos, but when we say red-tailed hawk, that's what we say in my area. It's not a hawk, it's a buzzard. But the problem is, in the United States, the term buzzard has incorrectly come to be used to represent vultures. So here's some, I'll never forget. I'll never forget I was in Mesa Verde National Park as a child, and you know, a budding falconer, and I saw some turkey vultures circling around. I was like, whoa! And I had my binoculars, and my friend was there too. And we're like, look at the turkey vultures. And this old ranger comes over, and he looks up with them, and he's like, looks at us, he goes, they're buzzards, boys, and keeps walking. And I'm like, they're not buzzards, they're vultures. A buzzard is a soaring hawk. So let's get this straight. Let's get this out of the way. Their true hawks are the forest hawks called the accipiters, such as the goshawk. The northern goshawk is, you know, probably the most recognizable one to just say accipiter. Short, rounded wings, long tail, diving in and out of the trees. Any member of that family is a true hawk. The buzzards are the quote-unquote soaring hawks. Red-tailed hawk is a perfect example of these, of what a buzzard is. Buzzards are usually open country. They have very long, very broad wings, comparatively long tails, but they're basically built like a scaled down version of some of the true eagles, like a golden eagle. But the fact of the matter is, I understand people watching this video might be like, Ben, you're saying it wrong. It's a red-tailed buzzard. Well, for the rest of the video, I'm going to say red-tailed hawk, but I just want to acknowledge that it's actually a buzzard. And if you say red-tailed buzzard, you're actually saying it more accurate than we are here in the States. But the red-tailed hawk is so iconic. Now, it has very wide range because it's doing something very right. It lives in most of Canada and Alaska, most of the all the continental United States, Mexico, and even quite a bit of Central America. That's a very broad range. You think about that whole range, you have mountains, you have deserts, you have prairies, you have very high country, very low country, tropical country, coastal country. They're everywhere. They fill it all. In some regions, they are more skittish of people, and in some, they're just like, I'm in a golf course, so go ahead. Play on through. I'm just killing gophers. They're just very effective at what they do, and they adapt accordingly wherever they need to be, and rule supreme in the buzzard world, in the soaring hawk, the buteo, the soaring hawk world, because they are adaptable. They can go after whatever they need to. There's in downtown New York City, there's a pair that is very famous that they hunt pigeons, basically almost exclusively. And there's even been documentaries on the one pale male, they call him, who would keep coming back every year and raise young. And it was a big deal thing. It's like, this is a downtown city, and yet they're every bit as home in the deserts or the mountains and so on. So they can adapt. But the red-tailed hawk, first of all, let's talk about the name. Red-tailed hawk, you think, well, I bet you it has a red tail. Well, not always. First of all, their first year of life, none of them have a red tail. No red-tailed hawk has a red tail. And then once they reach a year of age and molt into their first adult set of colors, many of them have a red tail. But as you would expect for a bird that ranges from the tundra to the tropics, there are a lot of color morphs. They're all beautiful. There are some that are very pale. There's what we call the Kreider's morph, which is very white to sometimes almost pure white, you know, on the front and everything. There's the Harlan's red tail, which a lot of times comes up from Alaska and the extreme Pacific Northwest, that usually doesn't have red tail even as an adult. So you get all these different color morphs that don't necessarily have subspecies names, and you get a few subspecies, but just what you have to know is their first year of life, they do not have a red tail, and then as an adult, some of them do get a beautiful red tail. Now, as far as being iconic, everybody on the planet who's seen movies has probably heard of red-tailed hawk. Their call, their screech, so iconic that Hollywood loves to use it in every movie to establish a scene, right? It's just like in the old Wild West movies, where the cowboys are about to have a shootout in town, and you'll have like a tumbleweed goes behind one of them, and then you hear a red-tailed hawk scream. And the bad part about that is you will also see that same screech used for all different kinds of other birds. In wrong parts of the world. It could be in Australia or in Taiwan, or it could be anywhere. And to have a dramatic moment, you come across this landscape where here's where a battle just took place, and you hear the red-tailed hawk scream. So that's very commonly used. Red-tailed hawks don't just go around screaming all the time, and very few of my red-tails that I've had have ever even used that. But it is a call that they do among other calls as well. So let's talk about the red-tailed hawk as far as its build. It is not the largest buteo or soaring hawk in the United States. It's one of the biggest. Arguably, some would say it has the strongest grip in its feet. It is true that feet of red-tailed hawks are enormous. They're strong, they're thick. Of course, as with any raptor, their first-year claws, are just coming in, but then they thicken with age. You have to cope them and trim them. But very powerful grip. And very long legs, well muscled up in the thigh to they're very incredibly powerful. Their musculature on their chest is robust, very strong, similar to a golden eagle, and able to have a lot of speed if they want to. Usually they don't want to, especially in the wild, as is the case with virtually all buzzards. The name of the game is conserve energy. It's like, can I eat a big meal and then just sit, put a foot up, poof up some feathers and be like, I'm okay. I'm sitting here just observing and not burning through calories quickly. And that's normally what they want to do. They're not like, I want to be spazzing out all the time. They'd rather be full and sit. And being birds of the open country, this is a raptor that is often spotted. It might be on top of a tree, but very often on top of a telephone pole or an electrical pole, where they have a good vantage point of what they can do. And usually also, when they catch prey, if it's too big to swallow whole on the ground, like maybe they're going to go after a rodent, but what if they catch something bigger, like a gopher or a prairie dog or a pigeon? They're going to fly up to a vantage point where they can pluck and eat their food. And if something comes after them to try to steal their meal, they can take off and have some speed. If you're on the ground and you're a soaring hawk and you're trying to eat a big meal, you're extremely vulnerable. And so you don't want to be in that position. So we see them very often in these high vantage points, which we'll get into how that can factor in with falconry here in a minute. But basically, they are the quintessential buteo. Long, broad wings, built for soaring, capable of speed if they want to. Not as fast as a goshawk, and not as fast as a Harris hawk, but still, when they want to, any falconer who's trained one properly knows they can be incredibly fast when they want to, or if they're trained to, or incentivized to. But you normally will not encounter that in the wild. In the wild, you will see them sitting there and just doing these long dives at ground-based terrestrial rodents is usually what they're going after. So that's most people's experience. And that is, I'm jumping ahead. But that's what you're normally going to encounter is in the wild, is just a seemingly lethargic, easygoing spirit of the wild. They're very common, and that's normally what you're going to encounter. Now we got to talk about them in falconry. American falconry, I've talked about it before in other videos, is for the most part very new. Most countries have a rich history of falconry with rich traditions, and that includes, in our country we mostly use these species. What about these? No, we don't do that. Why? It's not what we do. It's like, you can try them. Well, no need to. We know these are great. And in the United States, we were like, we don't do falconry, but we'd like to. Here, we got this bird. Let's try that. We could try one of these. We just tried everything. And so some of the prejudices that other regions had against buzzards, we didn't have. We're just like, red-tailed hawk, red-tailed buzzard. It seems like a cool bird. Well, give it a try. And turns out they're incredible. To the point that a lot of other countries that in the past weren't willing to fly buzzards are now more willing to try buzzards native to their area. But the red-tailed hawk, it's doing something very right. Again, if you are adaptable, you're going to survive. And in the wild, they are very adaptable. And in falconry, they are adaptable to many forms of being flown. Now, I started falconry in the 1900s, which sounds really old, back in the 1900s. In the United States, falconry is extremely heavily regulated, and there are ranks. You start off as an apprentice, then you become a general class, then a master class. And the higher you would get, the greater number of birds you could train, and the wider of a range of species. And as an apprentice, it used to be in the United States, we were only allowed to have one of two species, and that was either a kestrel, an American kestrel, which is, they've become incredibly popular in recent years, or a red-tailed hawk. And it used to be that most of the falconers that were the sponsors, the mentoring you, most of them were flying large longwings, a peregrine falcon, a prairie falcon, a gyr falcon, a saker falcon. They were flying something like that. And so your aspiration, just by virtue of who you were hanging around, your mentor, your sponsor, was a lot of times geared towards, hey, someday I want to do that. And because of that, not as many people would fly kestrels. And a lot of people flew red tails. The idea being, well, this is a bigger bird, therefore I'm developing some of the basic husbandry skills around a large bird that will prepare me for a big falcon someday. Even though a kestrel is a falcon, so in that sense you could be like, well, here's a little falcon, then you'll fly a big falcon. But just kind of the bias was, hey, a kestrel's kind of a toy, and why don't you get a red-tailed hawk? And so a lot of people flew red-tails. In my particular area in northern Utah, I'm kind of sad to see, now that apprentices are allowed to fly just about anything, how few people are flying red-tails. And kestrels have gotten very popular, which I'm thrilled about. But I'm kind of saddened that more people aren't flying red-tailed hawks, because they're wonderful birds. They're amazing birds. They're resilient. They're dynamic hunters. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. Now, I am going to try to share other areas of and styles of hunting with red-tails that I don't normally practice because of my region. And obviously, I'm just going to do a skim over with those because I haven't practiced them, but I want to make mention of them. So red-tailed hawks, I want to talk about their abilities, the good, the bad. Most people use red-tailed hawks to hunt rabbits. Now, it's generally accepted in the eastern United States, red-tailed hawks are much larger than in the western United States. The irony there is in the eastern United States, the rabbits being hunted are typically cottontail rabbits, which are much smaller. Where in the west, we are usually hunting jackrabbits, which are enormous. I mean, they can be like 14 pounds. They can be huge, some of them. Like the white-tailed jackrabbits and black-tailed jackrabbits can get enormous. So it's funny that we're using the smaller red-tails to hunt bigger game in more open country. And so the main way that most of us hunt is because we're out in the open sage country. Now, you might have some hills, but a lot of times it's just open sagebrush. And that kind of lends itself to very long chases. And so most people are hunting their red-tailed hawk off of the fist, or they're hunting maybe from a pole. Maybe you've got your bird on a pole that you're walking with, and they have a height advantage and they can see a little better, build up some speed a little quicker. But a lot of these chases are starting off very far. There's a big distance between you and the bird and the quarry. And jackrabbits can run. It's like they never run out of steam. And so it takes quite a bit of work in that kind of setting to build the confidence of a red-tailed hawk to get them to do that. Once they have that dialed in their head, then they know what to do. They know how to pace themselves. And then I go, okay, over sagebrush, over sagebrush, over sagebrush, bam! And they know how to do a wing over. They know how to when to, like, if it tucks into a bush, they know how to go up, and then you scream and you flush out the rabbit and go down. They understand. They learn quickly. But you have to work very hard to build their confidence in that kind of circumstance. Now, in my region, we love to use topography, geography, elevation changes. If we have any elevation change, we're going to use it. Well, you go over to the edge of a hill. Like, I use this clip all the time in this because it just shows what you do. You go to the edge and the rabbits are like, oh, there's a, and they go running off, and the hawk dives down, catches them. You get height advantage and the element of surprise. That is a way that works well. Now, some of these chases are close. They can be just right next to you. But some of them are very far away. There is also the opportunity to get your bird to just follow along. Any raptor can be trained to do this. Harris hawks are famous for it, but red-tailed hawks, you can easily train them to follow you. And once they understand that, hey, okay, I'm going to land on this juniper tree. Oh, I'm going to fly ahead and land on this rock outcropping. And they'll eventually learn, oh, hey, I'm going to fly ahead of the direction where he's going, and he will flush the rabbits towards me, and then I'll go down on it. It works effectively for cottontails and for jackrabbits both. Now, I have pushed in my early days red-tails to do things like hunting ducks on canals and things like that, which they definitely can do. People have hunted them with pheasants. But in my area, usually people are hunting off the fist, open country, big long chases, which red-tails can do. They're spectacular at. Another thing that can be done in my area, but is done a lot more in other areas, is training them to soar hawk or slope hawk. I haven't, you can train a red-tailed hawk to go up and wait on just like a big falcon. You can train them with balloons or drones or bagged game and train them, hey, circle above me from just straight up from the desert, and then I'm going to flush something up and you dive down and catch it. You can train them to do that. People have. I don't do that, but the ridge top technique works really good. And I don't have videos of this personally, but a couple photos here. But basically what you do, you go to the edge when there's an updraft, wind's blowing up, and might be blowing this direction too. And you let the hawk go, and it starts flying around. But this is a trained bird that knows, hey, wherever this human is, prey is going to appear, dinner is going to appear. And what they'll do is they'll turn into the wind to where they are not moving. They just micro adjust with their tail, with their wings just ever so slightly, and as long as they're facing into the wind, Bernoulli's principle of flight, with the air going over their wing, causes the right amount of lift for them to be stationary, just like a drone, just like a helicopter. It's amazing. And then if you keep walking this way, they'll turn with the wind, and they'll move, stop, keep going, move, stop. So you do that from an edge, and this isn't a video about slope soaring, but I'm just referencing it. The neat thing about this is the rabbits are very confused. They're like, is the hawk after me, or should I be more afraid of this human tromping around by me? I had one time where red-tailed hawk, we were flying, a rabbit snuck up and was in a bush like 6 inches from me, and the hawk just caught it right next to me, 6 inches from me. And it was like that rabbit surely thought it was safe and thinking, oh, that hawk will never come over by this human. And so slope soaring has a lot of advantages, and which I think is pretty amazing. I'm going to see if I can get permission to link some clips from some amazing videos that can really demonstrate this, that some other falconers in California have done. Now, a lot of people live in very dense country, and they will hunt squirrels. They'll also hunt rabbits, but they'll hunt squirrels in extremely dense, deciduous hardwood forests. That is so foreign to me. I've been out with people doing that in Texas and in Florida and in New York, and it's amazing to experience, but it's so foreign. We have forests in Utah, but most of the red-tailed hawkers, hey, we're heading out to the open country. But there's so many forests, it's like, hey, we're going to catch some squirrels. And this is a very different sport. Where you have these red-tailed hawks going through the trees and going up, and just these amazing three-dimensional battles in the sky, around the trees, up and down, and all over the place. They also can do that where you have them follow along on the edge of a field, and you go out after them, and you flush cottontail rabbits, which are small. Some people call that hamster hawking, because sometimes they're just, again, sitting at your feet, and it's not nearly as athletic as open country. Hey, 100 yards away, boom, a jackrabbit's running and your hawk's like, trying to catch up. It's a very different thing. But those squirrel hawking flights are incredible. There are a lot of extra equipment that are used. They have what they call squirrel chaps, where they have different types of addition to the anklets that can go around the feet to better protect the toes and the feet from the bites of a squirrel. Because if a squirrel gets caught, an inexperienced red-tail might not know how to subdue a squirrel properly yet, and it might turn around and bite your red-tail. Now, somebody might say, well, that's cruel that you would have them hunt squirrels and risk them injuring their toes. They hunt squirrels in the wild. And for that matter, the same thing. In my area where they're hunting open country rodents, prairie dogs, and ground squirrels, and mice and rats and voles. Those things turn around. You get a freshly trapped red-tailed hawk, and you can see on their feet they have wounds where rodents have bit them, and eventually they learn how to subdue them properly. So you're not doing something that's at all abnormal. To train a red-tailed hawk to hunt a squirrel is completely within what also they learn to do in the wild. But it is an incredibly athletic flight to watch. So those are kind of the basics of styles. Open country following along, soar hawking, squirrel hawking in trees. But they are adaptable. They can do many different things. And if you have a unique way that you think you could try to fly a red-tailed hawk, it is worth trying. It's good to know the limitations. Again, off the fist, they never will have the speed of like a goshawk or even a harris-hawk. But when they're dialed in and know how to use their momentum properly, they're an unstoppable force. They're insanely fast and able to catch a wide range of prey. So again, even though in the United States we kind of pioneered the use of buzzards, especially red-tails, that doesn't mean that we don't have biases. So I encourage people to see what are new ways that you can fly a red-tailed hawk. What are new prey species that you could pursue that perhaps if we thought outside of the box, we could try something new. So I love red-tailed hawks. This is just a basic video just to introduce them. I highly recommend them. They are fairly resilient to disease. They are fairly solid. They are fairly forgiving of human mistakes that you make, training mistakes along the way. Their weight management, it's not like, oh, I'm 2 grams off, my red-tailed hawk flew away, or I'm 2 grams too low, my red-tailed hawk died. They're pretty sturdy. They're like a Jeep or a truck, is how I view them. I think of like a Falcon as a race car. Think of a red-tailed hawk as a Jeep or a truck. And so the equipment is pretty straightforward, and the training is really a good experience to learn. I've decided not to do too much in some of the other specifics. I want to do some training videos specifically on how do you trap a red tail, what are some specific training techniques, what are some worries you need to avoid. But this, I just wanted to be a basic introduction of the species because they are incredible, and part of the big thing is putting the effort in with them. There are people, in my region, they were kind of viewed as a beginner's bird. They're not. They are a beginner's bird in the sense of a new falconer who's a first-timer can have great success with them. But that doesn't mean that, and then you got to get a better bird. There are many falconers all over the country and even all over the world where they're captive bred. That is their bird. That is their falconry bird. Why would you use something else? And it's kind of interesting that it's gone from people thinking that, oh, it's just a beginner's bird to, oh, it's something that this is my primary bird, to now I'm seeing them not being used as much in favor of micro-hawking birds like a Cooper's hawk, sharp-shinned hawk, merlin, a kestrel, which I love micro-hawking. But I think red-tailed hawks absolutely have their place in the falconry community. Whether you're a first-time falconer or a seasoned veteran, they're wonderful birds to fly, and I'd love to see more people flying them. So, hope this video is useful to you. If you have questions about red tails or suggestions of other red tail related videos you would like me to cover, please let me know down in the comments. If you haven't hit already, please hit subscribe and help me out. Keep the channel going, and as always, happy hawking.